The following is a Cable 14 special presentation.
The city of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase in 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, the city of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, known as North America. And we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers.
Hello and welcome to the Hamilton Network's 2022 Provincial Election Debates, presented live by Cable 14 in partnership with the Hamilton Spectator. I'm Mike Fortune, and once again, I will be your moderator. For the next 90 minutes, we are featuring candidates in the riding of Flamborough-Glanbrook. Joining us live in studio tonight are Allison Sillis for the NDP, Donna Skelly of the Progressive Conservative Party, and Melissa Willems from the Liberal Party. Thank you all very much for joining us this evening. We did invite the Green Party candidate running in Flamborough-Glanbrook to participate in this debate. However, Mario Portak declined our invitation. Also running in Flamborough-Glanbrook are Walt Jnitzwick for the Ontario Party, Nikita Mahood for the Populist Party, and Paul Simoes for the New Blue Party. Our format for this broadcast includes 2 minutes each for the candidates to make an opening statement. Then our local media panel will be posing questions with one follow-up opportunity before any other candidates may also ask to speak to the topic at hand. And finally, we will wrap up with a 1-minute closing statement from each of our candidates. Viewers at home, if you're watching live, make sure to tweet us at Cable14 or email election@cable14.com to share any questions you would like to ask these candidates. Now, I'll be doing my best to keep us on track with what's expected for each section and how we're doing for time. So without further ado, let's get started now with our 2-minute opening statements. Each candidate will get a 10-second warning before I call time. Representing the New Democratic Party, Allison Sillis, you are up first.
Good evening. Thank you so much to Cable 14 for hosting us this evening, and to those of you at home for taking the time to be here with us tonight. I'm Allison Sillis, your NDP candidate for Flamborough-Glanbrook, my home. As neighbors who told me that you feel like things are broken, things are only getting tougher, our healthcare system and long-term care homes have been set up for disaster by previous Conservative and Liberal governments, and we're on the brink throughout the pandemic when Doug Ford refused to invest in us. Rent and owning a home feels impossible. As a teacher and parent, I witnessed firsthand decades of previous Conservative and Liberal governments' cuts to our public education system. During the pandemic, Doug Ford made it clear that he is not working for us. Our small businesses, the heart of our community, were left behind to fend for themselves. Ford's plan to pave over farmland, even though it is clear that residents in Flamborough-Glanbrook voted overwhelmingly no to expand urban boundaries. Stephen Del Duca's Liberals were no better, and they had 15 years to fix all of these things, but chose not to. They cut funding, they laid off 1,600 nurses, sold off Hydro One, and made life more expensive for us. I've been alongside you here in Flamborough-Glanbrook through some of the darkest times in these last few years when you've reached out to me and said that you felt abandoned by our government. I delivered care packages and groceries to seniors and families in need when the food banks closed. I spent my Christmas holidays booking hundreds of vaccines for Hamiltonians who were left behind to fend for themselves, and yet again by Ford. But it's not all doom and gloom. I'm so proud of the NDP's plan for a better and more affordable Ontario. If you want movement on the issues that matter most, then NDP is your choice. I'm your neighbor, I am here for you, and I'm very excited to tell you about the NDP's plan for Ontario.
Thank you very much for those opening statements. We will now move on to Donna Skelly of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mike, and good evening, everyone. Under the leadership of Doug Ford and the Ontario PC Party, we have a plan to reclaim Ontario's status as the economic powerhouse of our great country. A plan to create new, high-paying jobs in healthcare, engineering, and, of course, the trades. A plan to build roads, highways, and transit. A plan that will give you a break and put more money back into your pocket. A plan to build new homes that people can actually afford. Young families should not have to move hours away from our city to purchase a home. We will help them realize the dream of home ownership, but it cannot and will not come at the expense of fragile green space. We will work with municipalities to increase housing supply while protecting our farmland and preserving the unique rural way of life in our quaint communities like Troy, Sheffield, Greensville, and Linden. Ontarians are tired of talk. They are tired of the Liberals and the NDP complaining. They are tired of delays and excuses that are holding us back. They deserve a government and a premier with a real plan. Ontario PCs are saying yes to rebuilding Ontario's economy by securing the future of clean steel through investments into Fasco. Yes to working with workers, and unions are saying yes to us by endorsing our plan. Yes to keeping costs down, and yes to building more hospitals, long-term care homes, and schools. Ontario has come too far to go back to the days of mismanagement and inaction. On June 2nd, the choice is clear. Vote yes to Donna Skelly, Doug Ford, and the Ontario PCs, and together we'll get it done.
Donna Skelly, thank you very much for your opening statement. We will now move over to Melissa Willems of the Liberal Party. You are up.
Thanks very much, Mike. Thank you as well for those of you who've tuned in to listen to us tonight. I personally believe that these events are very important, so I appreciate you joining us. My name is Melissa Willems, and I'm very proud to be the Liberal candidate for Flamborough-Glanbrook. A little bit about me. I'm a lawyer by training, but for years I've worked with the organizations that are responsible for setting the standards for safe, ethical, and competent healthcare. And I am very proud to have found a place with the Liberal Party that I know shares these values. We know that investing in people is what will drive progress in Ontario. That's why we are committed to building 1.5 million homes to help ease the skyrocketing costs of housing and make home ownership possible for those who are missing out. We will invest $1 billion to clear the surgical backlog that is literally killing patients. We will invest in mental health supports because healthy minds are as important as healthy bodies. We will cap class sizes at 20 for all grades and eliminate mandatory online learning. We will respect our seniors by ensuring that those who want to age at home can, and those who can't will have safe, quality care in publicly funded, long-term care and assisted living homes. And unlike the Conservatives, we will ensure that not one more senior dies alone and neglected in a long-term care home. And finally, no amount of highways will matter if we neglect our future. We will support businesses and homeowners to transition to green energy, encourage people to leave their cars at home, expand the greenbelt that Liberals created, and work with farmers to maintain and modernize local farming. We will also respect the decisions of municipalities and local conservation authorities. We called our platform a place to go for one reason. We are committed to growing the best of what our province offers.
That's fine. Thank you very much for your opening statements.
Thank you.
To all of our candidates, we will now be moving on to our local media panel, and it is time to bring them up. With us for this debate are Tevye Morrow of the Hamilton Spectator, and of course we have Rick Zamperin of 900 CHML, Bobby Herstovia of CBC Hamilton, and of course Jason Gaidola from CHCH, and Val Cole from Cable 14's The Hamilton Network. Each of our panelists will be choosing a candidate to answer a question They'll have the chance to ask one follow-up after the response, and then we'll open up the question to any of the other candidates here who may wish to speak to it. All of your responses will be limited to 1 minute. I will give a warning when your time is running out. And with that said, our first question comes from Tevye Morrow of the Hamilton Spectator. You're up.
Thanks very much. I'll direct my first question to PC candidate Donna Skelly. Donna, you probably know it's a bit of a transportation question and a housing question in one. You probably know that in Hamilton there's a lot of affordable housing advocates that are concerned about securing affordable units along the future LRT line. And I just want to ask, what would a PC government, should one get reelected, do to help ensure that there are affordable units along that future line?
Thank you for the question. We have invested hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in transit, not just in Hamilton, but right across the province of Ontario. And if you look at what we've done here in the city of Hamilton, the All Day Go Alone, it was a promise I remember as a journalist covering a story back, I think it was back in 2011, when the Liberals were talking about All Day Go, and it took our government many years later to actually see All Day Go come to the city of Hamilton. We've also brought hundreds of millions of dollars to expand the BLAST network, and of course our commitment to build LRT. In terms of housing itself, the City of Hamilton, along with all three levels of government, the City of Hamilton, the province, and the federal government, must work together to come up with a solution. There isn't one magic pill that is going to solve the housing crisis or the affordable housing crisis. It's going to take three levels of government collaborating. But we have focused a lot of money on intensification along transit hubs, and I know that the city will take the opportunity to build along those.
And that is the 1 minute. Tevye, do you have a follow-up that you'd like to ask?
Yes, please. I want to ask about inclusionary zoning.
Mm-hmm.
Inclusionary zoning, which is brought under the previous government, used to apply to anywhere in a city. The PC government decided to restrict that to just around major transit station areas. What's the reason for that?
Well, I think that our plan is really has multiple levels to it when it comes to addressing the housing crisis, and it has to. As I said, one of our opportunities that we're providing all municipalities across Ontario is to focus on transit-oriented development. We have a crisis, we know, in the city of Hamilton. Their own numbers project that they will see a population increase of 236,000 people by 2050. We want them to build along transit hubs because the infrastructure is there. It allows people to live and work in their own community and access the transit that we are providing. But I think we have to take a number of tactics in order to tackle this particular crisis. It's not just going to be resolved around transit hubs. We have to build all kinds of housing in order to provide housing for young people so they don't have to drive hours away from the city of Hamilton, so they can realize the dream of home ownership. There isn't one solution that will fix this housing crisis. It will take, as I said, all levels of government.
At this point, we are now going to open this topic up for everyone on the panel, specific to the question by Tevye. Who else would like to respond to this? Please, go ahead.
Absolutely. So the housing crisis in Hamilton, we know, is a huge issue, but it needs to be done in urban, dense areas. We're talking about affordability here. People do not have the income right now to be able to get to these homes that are, paving over farmland, highways to these McMansions that they can't afford. Investing in housing close to urban centers is the NDP's plan. We believe that housing is a human right, and we are committed over the next decade to build 1.5 million new homes, including 250,000 nonprofit and cooperatively owned homes, helping first-time homeowners and low-income tenants with direct financial support. We need to do this in the areas in Hamilton that are already to be developed instead of paving over farmland, which has been, the main goal of Doug Ford.
This is the debate section, so if anybody would like to jump in and follow up with that, please.
I'd like to add to that. I think that, yes, we recognize as well that the significant skyrocketing of prices of housing over the last 4 years has put home ownership significantly out of reach. But it can't just be a one-size-fits-all when you're looking at how you're going to build. And you have to be careful, particularly in communities like Flamborough-Glanbrook, but the rest of Hamilton, of how you actually do that building and where you build. We will support the gentle density, the gentle intensification of building of homes so that we are maintaining the character of our communities and ensuring, though, that the homes are not just affordable to a particular person who can afford $1 million home, which is now the average price in Ontario, which is, of course, out of reach for many people, but that the affordability will be possible for many types of people. One of the ways to do that is, of course, to go back to the original question, is to go back to where we can build where it makes sense for folks, and certainly having housing built near transit is great for many reasons, not the least of which, of course, is it's very climate friendly to not have people traveling significant distances to get to transit. But we have to be careful, though, that those high demand centers don't end up becoming so expensive that they end up, again, just reiterating the problem of being out of reach for many people.
Thank you all very much for those responses. We will move on as time permits. Joining us now from 900 CHML, Rick Zamperin. Rick, you're up.
Thank you very much, Allison, Donna, and Melissa. Thanks for joining us tonight. Great to see you, and thanks for taking part. Recent opinion surveys show that healthcare is still the #1 priority among the voting public. Maybe we'll start with Allison on this one. What's the biggest priority in your party's platform that is going to move our province forward when it comes to COVID recovery?
Absolutely. I've been hearing, I've been knocking on doors for a year and a half now, and that's something that comes up at every single doorstep. We know that that we are in a healthcare crisis. Our nurses, our healthcare workers, they are burnt out. They feel, they feel let down. They don't like to be called heroes when there's no backing up of this. The NEP, we have a plan to actually invest in our healthcare system and not just keep making these cuts. We want to be hiring 30,000 nurses, but also spend time to help train with proper credentials those who are internationally trained. That will definitely help with surgery backlogs, being able to get in, getting wait times in hospitals, end hallway medicine and things like that. Also, super important in our riding, we have a lot of healthcare workers. Absolutely repealing Bill 124, which will actually help retain a lot of healthcare professionals in Hamilton.
In terms of long-term care homes, is 100% nonprofit viable, and is that something that your party wants to do?
Absolutely. That is on top of mind for us and our goals. But not only looking at long-term care and making sure that the appropriate care is there, with hiring more PSWs, making sure hours are longer. My grandmother had PSWs, and it was very difficult to get anything more than half an hour of care. That is completely unacceptable. But in Flamborough-Glanbrook, a really important issue to do with this is actually home care. And I am so proud of the NEP's plan. We have a lot of seniors that do want to age at home, and the NEP has a plan to be able to keep them in their homes longer with grants for things like handrails, chair lifts, things like that, and also to have the personal support workers coming in and ensuring that we have enough of them to make sure that, they're getting the care that they deserve.
That is the 1-minute response for that follow-up question. The debate portion has now opened up. Please, anyone that would like to jump in on this?
Sure, I'll go first. Thank you. So I love to hear that healthcare is still a #1 priority amongst voters, because it is a personal priority for me as well. I've working closely with patients and healthcare providers for almost 20 years. I've heard, particularly in the last few years, very concerning stories about the state of our healthcare system, and that our providers are burnt out and exhausted and feeling disrespected. I think one of the things we absolutely have to prioritize is ensuring that people are getting health care in a timely way. And that is why we have committed to contributing $1 billion towards clearing out the surgical and other hospital procedure backlog so that people are getting their care in a timely manner. We know that unfortunately, as a result of some of the poor decision-making over the last couple of years, there have been unnecessary delays to folks getting the care that they need. And that has resulted in worse health outcomes, or sometimes in the saddest situations, death. And we have to do better going forward.
Thank you very much for that response, Donna. We will let you get it 30 seconds here.
Thank you, Mike. I have to respond to the Liberals' dismal record on healthcare from 2011 to 2018. The Liberal government, the previous Liberal government, created 600 long-term care beds across the province of Ontario. 600. We, in one term, 4 years, created almost triple that, 1,750 plus beds in the city of Hamilton alone. To this date, because COVID highlighted the disastrous, what the Liberals did to LTC, to long-term care, after 15 years in power, we have 30,000 new beds in the pipeline right now, another 30,000 that are being refurbished. The Liberal government, or the Liberal Party, wants to privatize, spend $10 billion buying out private long-term care facilities. Not one bed will be created, and they will have spent $10 billion in a sector that they neglected for over 15 years.
Response?
Well, we don't want to privatize that, so I don't know, maybe that was just a slip of the tongue, but no, we
want to
know
purchase it.
when there was, and that's the exact
bring it into
publicly
public care.
funded purchase is not privatization. Of course, we all know that. We know that when you mix profit with care, you diminish the care and increase the profit, and that is what we want to combat. Over the last 2 years, the homes that did worse for outcomes for our seniors were the privately funded homes. And yes, it will cost a lot of money, but sometimes you have to have the courage of your convictions and put your money where your mouth is, and that's where we intend to do.
Thank you very much for those responses to that particular question. We're now going to be moving on to Bobby Herstova of the CBC Hamilton. Bobby, you're up.
My first question is for the Liberal candidate. The Liberal Party has been talking about Buck a Ride, which would reduce transit to $1, transit rides to $1. In a riding like Flamborough, you might not get to use that very much, but you will have to pay for it. What would you say to disgruntled residents who don't want to pay for other people's bus rides?
Thank you for the question. So a couple of things. I think that we all as a province benefit from priorities like this. So one of the pieces that come from this that we will all benefit from is, of course, the environmental impact. We get cars off the highways. We get people back into transit. We know, because we saw it at the very beginning of the pandemic, that emissions go down, the environment is healthier, which is good for all of us. If you take these roads and there's fewer cars on the road, that is also to your benefit. If you do not have the option of perhaps taking transit where you're going, then that's beneficial for you. But the other piece is, I think we fall into a trap of the us versus them situation with this type of issue that suggests that if that is being done for those folks, and then nothing's being done for me, which we know, of course, is not the case. We have to, as governments, look at the big picture and then figure out what makes sense as a collective package of policies that will benefit everybody. We can't expect that everybody will always benefit in the same way from every single
And
thing.
that is time for that response. Bobby, do you have a follow-up question to the Liberal candidate?
I don't, but I have a question for the Conservative candidate.
Well, we'd like to stick with that particular question, if you don't mind, for right now. Can we save that one for a little bit later?
Okay.
Okay.
My follow-up question, just on transportation there, we talk about a bus driver shortage and school bus driver shortage in the Flamborough-Glanbrook area. It's affected midday busing for families and rural families just struggling to get their kids to school. So I wonder, if elected or re-elected, for other candidates out there, how will you fix that? How will you address that? And how do you improve access to education and quality of education?
1 minute before we open up that topic for everybody.
Thank you. Those are two big questions in there. So with respect to transit, by properly funding transit and prioritizing it in the way that it should, we will ensure that we don't end up with these shortages going forward. We know that there are people out there who can do this work, but you have to have the money to actually hire them and to provide that support. With respect to education, I'm not sure I can get the answer to that in what I have left of a minute, but certainly we intend to be investing in education and significantly increasing the funding of education, which would start with reversing the cuts to education that the Conservatives did at the very beginning of their tenure, when they decided one of the first things to start off that would be effective for them as a party would be to cut teachers. So we will be reversing that.
That is the 1 minute. This question now is open for debate. Yes, please, Alison Sillis.
This is a huge issue in Flamborough-Glanbrook. We know that we have had students in some of the rural parts of our riding that have been waiting an hour and a half on the side of the road for school buses because of these shortages. The NEP has a plan to tackle this. We're looking at increasing the minimum wage to $20. This is a way to retain more workers and increase access to buses and whatnot. Also, our plan to bring in pharmacare, dental care, mental health supports for all Ontarians will actually, entice some people to be doing some like these bus rides because they are generally part-time work. So we have areas that we're looking at this. Education is huge to me. I'm a teacher. I have kids in school. Hiring over 20,000 more education workers, mental health supports, fixing what is broken in schools, the repair backlog, maintaining full-day kindergarten, class and cap sizes. These are all so important, and it's what we deserve here in Flamborough-Glanbrook because we have been neglected for so long.
Debate floor is open.
We've invested record amounts of money in transit initiatives in the city of Hamilton, and finally, despite the years of promises from the previous Liberal government, delivered on All Day Go. Hundreds of millions to expand the Blast network, but not everybody in the province of Ontario, and particularly in Flamborough-Glanbrook, can take transit. Farmers, it's really hard for a farmer to bring their crop to market in the back of a bus. People need to drive, but both of the Liberals and the NDP have waged a war on drivers. We want to make it easier for drivers to get to work and home with their families. We're building more roads. We're cutting the price of gas. I can't believe it, how out of touch Andrea Horwath is. She wants to increase. The number one issue at the door today is the price of gasoline. And Andrea Horwath came out with a statement. She's going to make it more expensive for people to fill up. It just shows how out of touch they are with people who need to drive. And we're not just building roads, we're investing in manufacturing. The previous government, under the previous government, 300,000 manufacturing jobs fled Ontario. Our government is investing in electric vehicles. We have $12 to $14 billion of new investment in electrical vehicles coming to Ontario. They're building the cars here. They're building the batteries here. We're mining the minerals in the Ring of Fire. We've just struck 2 historic deals with Indigenous communities in the north, and they want to be part of this. We believe the best way to get people across Ontario is to invest in green technology, let them drive, and invest in transit.
Since both parties were mentioned in that response, Liberal NDP, let's get the Liberals' response to that, and then we'll go to you, Alison.
So, of course, we are not waging a war on cars. That sort of rhetoric, I think, misses what is happening and the differences that are between the three parties. On the day that the writ was dropped or the campaign started, we announced that Stephen Del Duca, as the leader of the Liberal Party, announced that one of our most significant priorities was to fund education properly. And rather than building a very expensive highway that would benefit a much smaller number of people, as well as some developer donors to the Conservative Party, we would instead take that $10 billion and put it into education, where everybody across the province will benefit. We will build 200 new schools and completely eliminate the backlog of repairs at all the schools, so that we can then improve the quality of education that our students are getting to the level that they deserve.
Please.
To say that the NDP is waging a war on drivers is completely false rhetoric. The NDP actually has tangible plans to help support drivers. We're ending gas gouging at the pumps. Bringing back electric vehicle incentives. The 407 becoming free for transport trucks and transport vehicles, which will actually end gridlock on a lot of the highways, get people where you need to go faster. Lowering auto insurance rates, which will put up to $660 back into your pockets. These are ways that the NDP can do this and support those who need to drive in our communities, while also focusing on transit where we need it.
Okay. Anybody else like to respond to that? Time to move on then. Great stuff. From CHCH, Jason Gaidola, you are up, please.
Thank you, Mike, and I want to thank all the candidates for being here tonight. My first question is going to be directed to the incumbent, Donna Skelly. We saw another Hamilton Tory candidate not partake into a local debate And we're also hearing that other local candidates are not also taking part of debates. He's reportedly said this, and except for Sam Moosterhoff out in Niagara. With respect to voters and seeing who their candidates are, why have you been chosen to speak today, or why are you here? Why are you debating today?
Well, I'm here to speak to the people of Flamborough-Glanbrook because I want them to understand that we believe that another 4 years under Doug Ford will help us complete some of the projects that we initially started in our first term. And I know that after knocking on thousands of doors, a lot of them want to see us back at the helm because they realize we have a job to do. But I'm here to talk to the people of Ontario. I'm here to talk to the people in Flamborough-Glanbrook to tell them about our plan, to create high-paying jobs. You know, we saw, as I said just a while ago, under the previous Liberal government, hundreds of thousands of jobs fled the province of Ontario. If you drive anywhere in Ontario today, you'll see a help wanted sign because our economy is on fire. We have people that want to get into the trades, get a good paying job in the trades, healthcare, in schools. We're building more roads. We're not ashamed of building roads and infrastructure. It was neglected by too many years under the previous government. We want to get things done. That's why I'm here tonight to speak to you, to share our platform, our plan, and to speak to the people of Flamborough-Glanbrook.
Follow-up question, Jason?
Yeah, follow up again for Donna. Were you directed to take part of this debate, or was this by choice?
Oh, this is by choice. I wanted to debate. I loved talking to the people of Flamborough-Glanbrook, whether it's at the door, and as I said, I've been speaking to them through the pandemic. I've been speaking and reaching out to them, knocking on doors for the past 4 years, reaching out to them virtually during the pandemic, calling them during the pandemic. And this is just another opportunity to share our plan on why it's important to give Doug Ford and the Ontario Ps another mandate.
We will open this now up for debate. I'm sure our other candidates would like to respond to this, and it is for debate. Yes, please,
Sure.
Melissa.
I'll respond. So I will give credit to Ms. Skelly for being here. But I think what we've seen with other Conservative candidates across the province not attending their debates is a symptom of this government's lack of interest in being accountable for their decisions over the last 4 years, which is particularly concerning given what we have gone through and are still going through with the pandemic. If you are a government that cannot require your candidates to attend, then how can you expect the people of Ontario to elect you as a government? You have to have the courage of your own convictions.
Ms. Ellis?
Absolutely. Showing up to these is so important. That's why myself attending high schools here in Flamborough-Glanbrook, as well as visiting with the residents of St. Elizabeth Village yesterday as well too. It's very important, and it's notable when people are missing, and the residents of Flamborough-Glanbrook are finding that. But it's so important to show up daily. I live in this riding. This is my home. This is my community. I promise to be here every day for you. This isn't a photo op for me. This isn't a fly by the night and come in before. This is my home. This is so important. And, you know, this is a way to show up for you, and I will continue to do so.
Ms. Skelly, response to either of your competition?
That's fine.
You're good?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. I think we will then continue on. Jason Guidola from CHCH, thank you very much. We do appreciate that. Did anybody else have any follow-up to that? No? We're good? Okay. I think we're going to be bringing up Val Cole now from the Hamilton Network. Val, your question, who you're directing it to, please.
Well, this question is for Donna. It's from Dr. Sally Palmer, chair of the Hamilton Social Work Action Committee. She asks, the PC party has committed to increase by 5% the monthly amount of the Ontario Disability Support Program and to link further increases to inflation. There was no such promise made to increase the monthly amount of Ontario Works. If elected, how would you respond to rising inflation being experienced by these two groups?
Thank you for that, Val, and thank you, Sally. I know her quite well. We have many discussions, believe me, over the course of the past 4 years. In fact, I recall during a snowstorm where I went and we piled a bunch of women in the car and we went off to a local Tim Hortons to talk about issues that matter very much to her and to members of her community. We have committed to increasing ODSP by 5%, but we're also trying to make, and I said this is part of our initial platform, and it's for all Ontarians. We have to make life more affordable. we are seeing, inflation that is really hurting young families, hurting all families, hurting seniors, hurting people right across Ontario. And we have brought forward a number of initiatives even before the writ was dropped. For example, and I want to, once again talk about the NDP, but we believe that the price of gas at the pumps is just simply, it's too high. And so we have committed to reducing the cost of gasoline by at least 10 cents a litre. On the other hand, the NDP wants to restore that tax. I mean, it just shows that they're so out of touch with the average family. When the Liberals were in power, they introduced, which was by far the worst public policy ever brought forward in the history of Ontario, the Green Energy Act. The skyrocketing energy rates caused companies to flee Ontario. We saw manufacturing decimated. People were actually choosing between eating and heating their homes. And that was a direct result of an energy program brought forward by Stephen Del Duca, who is sitting at the table alongside Kathleen Wynne. These are the kinds of things that we know are facing all Ontarians, and we're bringing forward many initiatives so that it's a little bit more affordable for them as we navigate these historic inflation rates.
I'd like to bring the other candidates in, NDP first, and followed by the Liberals. Please, Alison.
Absolutely. To say that the NDP is out of touch with the average family here in Flamborough-Glanbrook couldn't be further from the truth. I'm hearing constantly that we know affordability is an issue, and the NDP has ways to be doing this. Increasing the minimum wage, creating green jobs here in Flamborough-Glanbrook, looking at post-secondary education, which has become so out of touch for so many. As a teacher, I find it so difficult to say to my students, work hard, you'll be able to live your dream, when I know that's not been the reality for so many of them. Looking at affordable homes, these are all ways that we can be helping those who need it the most. And as I mentioned, our dental care, our pharmacare plan, these are all ways to tackle a lot of these affordability issues that are going on. And I'm really proud of what the NDP has in plan for, the average family here in Flamborough-Glanbrook, which is what I'm a part of.
Melissa?
I'd like to go back to the original question because I think it's a group that we often talk about very briefly and give lip service to and then very quickly move on. And I think that's a strong disservice to our community members who are on ODSP or Ontario Works. We have committed to raising the funding for both groups by 20% over the next 2 years. One thing, though, we have also committed to do is to be constantly reviewing and improving as needed on our policies. We spent 2 years, the Liberal Party spent 2 years consulting with thousands of folks across Ontario, including here in Flamborough-Glanbrook, about what we needed to do, how we needed to do it, and how we needed to pay for it. And we made sure that one of the priorities in our platform is that we don't leave the most vulnerable behind. And I'm here because I want to make sure that we are giving a voice to those people who are often silenced.
Please.
I have to say that, I want to push back a little bit because under the previous Liberal government, there was no voice for these people. We brought in the 5% increase. It was the largest increase in more than a decade. And don't forget, the Liberals were in power at that time. We also increased social assistance by $1.2 billion in our first full year in government. That's almost $1 billion more than the previous Liberal government in their final year, 2017 and 2018. We brought in the LIFT credit, the low-income workers tax credit. It provides up to $850 million to almost 2 million low-income Ontarians, and $1 billion through the Social Services Relief Fund to help vulnerable Ontarians access affordable housing and social services. We also introduced legislation to increase ODSP rates, tying them to inflation. So we've been very clear, as has our Premier. We always want to take care of our most vulnerable, and we're going to ensure greater access to better jobs, better paychecks, and more money in their pocket.
Would we like to continue to debate this or move on? We're going to be moving on. Okay, and again, thank you very much to Val Cole with a question that came from one of our viewers, submitted by tweeting us at Cable14 on Twitter, or of course emailing election@cable14.com. We have another round of questions if our candidates are ready for it. And of course, it's nice to bring back from the Hamilton Spectator, Tevye Morrow. Tevye, you're up.
Thanks very much. I'll direct this question to the NDP candidate, Alison. I'm sure you're aware, a few years ago, we had a massive sewage spill in Hamilton. It went into Chidoke Creek and Cootes Paradise. I'm just wondering what your party would do should it should inform the government to help prevent another sewage spill like that in the future?
Yep, absolutely. This is an area that, is actually front of mind for a lot of the residents in Flamborough-Glanbrook because the climate is so important. We've had the Liberals talk a good game for 15 years and not change anything, and it's very obvious that the Conservatives have a anti-climate agenda. So our Green New Democratic deal wants to be looking at the environment, ensuring that there's inspections and that these protections are being able to take place to prevent such spills and to be protecting our wetlands and our water. In Flamborough-Glanbrook, we actually, unfortunately, have capped off abandoned oil and gas wells, which a lot of people don't actually realize. 10 of them are in Hamilton, 5 of them are in Pembroke alone. 1 of them is uncapped. So we need to bring some regulations to make sure that homes are safe, that families are safe, and we don't see an incident like what happened in Wheatley, Ontario.
I want to ask you about highways and bridges. The Progressive Conservative government has placed an emphasis during this campaign on how they're going to build highways and bridges. This morning, today, we heard Doug Ford say the NDP says no to building anything. And I want to ask you to respond to that, but also I want to ask you, what would the NDP do to deal with congestion on our highways?
Absolutely. The NDP is all for building where it's appropriate and to those who need it the most. Looking at our affordable housing plan, to be, like I said, bringing 1.5 million affordable homes over this next decade. That's a way that we can be helping those. But in Flamborough-Glanbrook, the environment is so important. We have a huge chunk of the green belt here, and we know that residents do not want the urban boundary expansion. Overwhelmingly, residents here voted no for that expansion. They do not want highways through their farmlands. They want it protected, and the NDP has a full commitment to be doing that.
Thank you very much for that response. We are now going to open this up to the rest of the panel here, and of course, both were brought up. Donna?
I have to talk about, because obviously the NDP didn't, my colleague from the NDP didn't answer the question about building roads because they don't want to build roads. People in these, both the Liberals and the NDP, don't want to recognize that there are people that live in rural Ontario that need to drive. I drive back and forth from Toronto daily, and I'm telling you, the traffic congestion is unbelievable. And families and drivers are stuck in gridlock. It's costing them hours a day that they're away from their families. It's costing our local economy and our economy as a general billions of dollars in lost revenue each and every day. It's not sustainable. We have to build infrastructure within cities. If we're going to have massive intensification to address the projected growth in the city of Hamilton, we must invest in infrastructure. We must build smaller roads, in interior roads, but we also have to build highways. People don't all live in downtown Hamilton. They commute to their jobs. They deserve to be able to spend time with their family and get to and from work safely and in a timely manner.
Melissa, please.
I think it's deeply inaccurate to refer to the Liberals as not having done anything with respect to climate, pollution, the environment. We created the Greenbelt that these other 2 candidates rightfully speak very highly of and express our desire and need to protect. There was a report that came out this morning about the Conservative record on the climate and environment, and it found that the Conservatives have done more to stop or reverse environmental protections and climate change measures than they've done to actually addressing them. Our climate cannot survive continued efforts to erode our natural green belt as well as our air.
I have to jump in. And we were talking about roads, but under the previous Liberal government, they didn't build any roads in Ontario, and that's why we see the congestion that we see here in Ontario today. It was 15 years of sitting and doing nothing, and now we, once again, form government and have to clean up the mess left by the previous Liberal government. But let's talk about the Greenbelt. The Liberals opened up and carved up the Greenbelt 17 times, and they took away 350 acres while they were in power. We believe in protecting it, and we are going to grow the Greenbelt.
But how do you stand for, you're claiming that you're protecting the Greenbelt, yet you're wanting to come in with Doug Ford's message to pave over, to expand urban boundaries, knowing that that is not what the residents of Flamborough-Glanbrook want. I live here. This is my home. I talk to my neighbors all the time about this. We do not want urban boundary expansion in Hamilton. And for you to say that you were for green space and all of that, we know that that's not true, because you're saying that you want to expand the urban boundary and go against what the City of Hamilton, the residents want, and also what our councillors have voted to keep.
I just have to clarify, and you need to. First of all, I don't want to do anything. The City of Hamilton has to put forward a plan to accommodate their own numbers of projected growth of 236,000, but you have to look at the plan. You probably don't understand, but there's no greenbelt in it. There's no greenbelt. It's not being touched in any of the urban boundaries. So before you make these allegations, it's important to understand. Take a look at the boundary. Take a look at the planning that the city is putting forward. It's not even close to the greenbelt. Nothing that the city has put forward would open the greenbelt. So it's imperative that you take a look. It's called a white belt, and I'm not saying do it.
It's not what the city's putting forward. It's what your government wants to put
No.
forward. That's the
We're talking
difference.
about, you mentioned the greenbelt. Our government is committed to preserving the greenbelt. But the city of Hamilton has to meet its obligation to build enough homes to accommodate its projected growth. And nobody on this panel or at the City of Hamilton is talking about the Greenbelt. That's off the table.
Anything else, folks?
Well, I think the communities around the proposed 413 would disagree that the Greenbelt's not being talked about by the Conservative Party.
Okay, we will leave it at that. We will continue on with our questions. Thank you very much for that lively debate. Joining us back from 900 CHML, Mr. Rick Zamprin. Your question, please, sir.
Kind of surprised that gas prices were about halfway through and gas price finally came up. So last Donna, PC leader Doug Ford promised a gas tax cut the last time around, 4 years ago. It didn't happen. Will a temporary gas tax cut, and what he's proposing a 5.7% cut between July 1st and the end of the year, will that gas tax cut happen?
We've already implemented a 4-point-something% gas tax cut. It came in April. We are going to be bringing in another gas tax cut July 1st, and I want to position that against what my colleagues on either side are proposing. I mean, we have parties that believe in supporting the carbon tax, and the carbon tax is so unfair to Ontarians today. I mean, we know we're seeing these record prices at the pumps, and both of the leaders of the Liberal and the NDP believe in supporting the carbon tax. I mean, if we could do one thing for Ontarians today and drivers today, it would be to eliminate, at least temporarily, the carbon tax. But I remember being in the legislature, and one of the candidates, he's an incumbent and he's running for the Ontario NDP. He wants the largest carbon tax in the country. Actually, in North America, 39%. He's the member for Ottawa Centre. I mean, this is the kind of nonsense. You cannot continually tax people to pay for these outrageous promises that the members from both of the other parties are proposing, not just tonight, but that we've seen from their leaders.
Follow-up?
Yeah, as a follow-up, one way to beat gas prices is to jump into an electric vehicle. The Ford government's canceled the electric vehicle rebate program after taking power. If re-elected on June 2nd, will the PCs reinstitute some kind of electric vehicle rebate?
We're doing it. We've got a better plan. We're creating an environment to manufacture electric vehicles here in Ontario. We want people to be able to afford them. Taxpayers shouldn't have to subsidize it. We want companies from around the world to recognize Ontario as the leader in EV technology. We've already seen $14 billion in investments in electric vehicle technology. We're building batteries here in Windsor at a new plant. We are, as I mentioned earlier, we have struck 2 unprecedented deals with 2 First Nations communities so that we can work with them and mine the resources needed for these batteries. We don't believe that the solution to getting people to drive electric vehicles is to subsidize the vehicle. It's to create the environment to manufacture the vehicles here in Ontario. That way we all win. We've got great jobs and people can afford to drive them.
Thank you for that response. This topic is now open for debate. with anyone that would like to get involved. Yes, Allison.
Absolutely. Talking about electric vehicles, we know obviously the NDP agrees that this is a very important thing, but it's convenient because, Ford's Conservatives actually paid to have electric vehicle charging stations ripped out of the ground. I'm actually very glad that Donna brought up the point of, how are we going to pay for the way to take care of Ontarians? I'm glad that you brought that up. We are going to actually make sure that the largest corporations are paying 2% more. We will ask the wealthiest 2% of Ontarians who are making over $220,000 a year just to pay 1% more in their taxes, and the even wealthiest Ontarians who are earning over $300,000 to pay only 2% more in taxes. These are very modest increases, and for the people who can actually afford to pay for them, and it will actually provide billions of dollars for our healthcare system, affordable housing, and to fight climate change.
Anybody else like to jump in on this? Yes.
Sure,
please, from the
thank you,
Liberals.
Mike. Yes, so we will not reverse. We will also apply the reduction in the gas tax for a time period to take into account the extreme circumstances that we have right now. But again, it's short term. And to the question, this sort of short term decision, while may be helpful, is not at the end of the day really going to help people with their overall affordability. We believe strongly, and I believe strongly, that it's not just about giving people more money so they can buy expensive gas. The electric vehicle rebate that we would put into place to reverse the decision by the Conservatives to remove it will help people more than just having them built here in Ontario, because we know things can leave Ontario before they get purchased by us, but by providing this rebate so that people can better afford to buy a vehicle that will work for them as well as for the environment. And yes, one of the first things the Ford Conservatives did coming into power was to tear out existing vehicle chargers if you want to get a glimpse of the environmental vision that this government has.
Thank you very much. Donna,
I
you'd
just
like
have
to
to
respond?
respond to my friend from the NDP and again, the plan. The NDP, their solution to everything is tax, 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 tax. We don't want to take more money out of your pocket. We know it's expensive to live right now. Inflation is going through the roof. We are creating jobs. Under the previous Liberal government, 300,000 people left, the manufacturing jobs left. Today, we have hired 550,000 more people than the day we took office. Our economy is on fire. We don't have enough people to fill the jobs. That's how we pay for things. We build a great economy and we allow companies to hire people and pay them good wages.
Follow-up responses to this?
The NDP will not be taxing the everyday Ontarians as claimed. As I mentioned, only those making over $220,000 a year. When you're talking about jobs and, help wanted signs, we need an actual affordable minimum wage, and that's why I'm glad that the NDP will be implementing the $20 a day minimum wage. Mentioning the trades and in education, the Ford government made all these cuts to education, and unfortunately, the trade programs in high schools here in Flamborough-Glanbrook were the ones that were affected by these cuts. So I'm glad that the NDP has a plan to invest in education, bring this back, which will also help with the workforce one day.
Thank you all for those responses to that particular question. We are now going to be moving on to Bobby Rostova of the CBC. Bobby, your question, please.
My question is for the Conservative candidate. You mentioned ODSP and raising that up by 5%. That would take the average monthly payment of roughly $1,100 to $1,155. The average rental price for a one-bedroom unit in Hamilton, if you're renting, is roughly $1,500. Can you live off $1,155? And how do we know that the PCs will follow through with that promise?
Well, as you mentioned, yes, we are going to be increasing ODSP rates by 5%, and that's a $425 million increase across the board again. It is the largest increase in the past 10 years. We have also introduced the LIFT tax credit. It's called the Low-Income Workers Tax Credit, and it provides up to $850 to $1.7 million low-income Ontarians, providing $1 billion through Social Service Relief Fund. Look, we know it's difficult to find affordable housing in Ontario. And as I said, I wish there was one thing that we could all do to solve the crisis tomorrow. It isn't. It's not going to happen. We have to work with the not-for-profit sector. I work with Indwell very closely. They're an amazing organization that works with some of our most disadvantaged in the city of Hamilton. We have to work with the municipalities, and we have to work with the federal government to come up with a solution to provide housing, not only housing I call affordable housing and housing people can afford. I think that some are subsidized and some is not, but the solution isn't going to, we're not going to arrive at a solution tomorrow. It's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take effort from all three levels of government.
Bobby, follow-up question?
Yeah, this is once again for you, and for anyone else who wants to weigh in on this one, I'd love to hear your answer. We're not very far from the former Mohawk Institute Residential School. We've heard the Survivors Secretariat ask for money from the province. They asked for $9 million over 3 years. They got a fraction of that, I think 1.3 if I'm correct. But I want to know, what does reconciliation mean to you and your party? And can you give us some concrete examples of how you actually would reconcile and move that forward?
Well, I think in what we've invested in the Indigenous curriculum, for example, in our schools, we launched Ontario's first update to the Indigenous Studies curriculum for grades 9 to 12, students in grades 9 to 12, and that was since the first time it's been upgraded since the year 2000. And this was developed in consultation with Indigenous peoples across Ontario. In 15 years, the Del Duca Wynne Liberals never once managed to update this curriculum, despite the fact that they had, we've heard from so many of our First Nations communities about the Truth and Reconciliation Committee recommendations, et cetera. And like all Ontarians, I think we were all heartbroken by the news of the unmarked graves that were found across the country. But, you know, we do work with Indigenous communities right across Ontario. And one of the things that I think I'm really proud of is the fact that we have these two historic deals in Northern Ontario. When I say Northern Ontario, I'm talking about the Ring of Fire, which is 500 kilometers north of Thunder Bay. We're talking about the north of Northern Ontario. And they wanted to work with us so that we could create jobs, build a road so that people in the north communities could actually access health care and actually move to and from their communities. So I'm proud of our relationship with our Indigenous communities, and I'm proud that we can actually get things done to help them also have a future in the north.
We will now open this topic up for debate. Yes, please, Allison.
This is such an important issue. We've known for decades and longer. We still have Indigenous communities that are on boil water advisories. We have children who have never known what it's like to get water out of their taps clean. This is unacceptable. The Liberal and conservative governments have played ping pong back and forth, jurisdictional ping pong for who should be taking care of this. That has to end. You know, the NDP will work will continue, should I say, to work with First Nations communities and community-led solutions for housing, for healthcare, and for clean drinking water. And we'll actually implement the recommendation of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, as well as the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. You know, we won't engage in this jurisdictional ping pong. We need to get it done. They deserve so much more. The same what we have. It's completely unacceptable that this is still happening, and it's 2022. The NDP will fix it, and if we have to, we'll send the bill to Ottawa.
I would like to get Melissa's response if she has to.
So one of the ways that we can ensure that we are actually acting on the Truth and Reconciliation Report is by prioritizing, putting leadership on it. One of the first items we would like to do is we will create an appointment of a Minister of Indigenous Reconciliation to advance the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. Those calls to action came years ago, and very little progress has been made on those. Dear to my heart is that we will ensure that Indigenous persons receive culturally competent and responsive health care so that no Indigenous person has to worry that their healthcare provider will minimize their concerns because that they are Indigenous. We will also ensure that childcare options are offered and delivered within Indigenous communities by Indigenous people, because we will respect their right to self-determination.
Anybody else like to respond to this? We are good? Okay, thank you very much. Candidates in the Flamborough-Glanbrook riding who were not invited to participate in tonight's debate, they were given an opportunity to record a statement for inclusion in tonight's broadcast. Now, before we continue with more questions from our media panel, here is the pre-recorded statement from the Populist Party candidate, Nikita Mahood.
Hi, my name is Nikita Mahood. I'm your Populist Party Ontario Flamborough-Glanbrook candidate. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself today. Thank you, Cable 14, for allowing me to partake in this intro video. I wear many hats. I'm a mother. I'm a McMaster Economics student, third year. I am a school bus driver, a community outreach leader. I'm responsible for the creation of Raise Up Your Neighbor food drive-through in the summer of 2020. I've been in leadership roles in community housing in the Golden Horseshoe. I'm a small business owner and a homesteader. So I also lived in my car for a time during the very legal trucker convoy in February. And I will never stop fighting for freedoms, and that's why I joined the PPO. So a little bit about the PPO. We are a social enterprise party. We're grassroots and we have no politicians. Whether or not we get seats or are elected, we will continue to educate and advocate for small government and self-sustainability. We want to teach sovereignty, and we want to support people in their choice first and foremost, and support the charter and make sure that it is not ever infringed upon again. Some of our policies, we would do away with mandates. No more mask mandates, no more vaccine mandates. We will support choice always. As far as housing prices, we would fight that by banning foreign ownership. When billionaires buy up properties from other countries, it artificially inflates our housing prices. In education, we would like to inject the trades fully into high school. We want to teach high school students with HVAC specialists to build passive thermodynamic heat systems for seniors. We would scrap the carbon tax. As far as public health, we would like to rebuild public health in a way that gives them no power for mandates and to become a recommending body only. We would dismantle and rebuild the College of Physicians, CPSO. We recognize that our system is very broken and has gone astray from what is good for people, and we want to really get to the bottom and rebuild rather than simply make decisions within the system and scratch the surface of, no mandates. That's great, but we really want to get to the bottom and rebuild our institutions and do what's truly right for Ontarians. And that is what I will continue to support whether or not I'm elected. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for that. Now, I want to mention for our viewers, if you miss any part of this broadcast or want to see candidates from the other area, Hamilton area ridings, you'll find the full schedule and all of our debates on demand at cable14.com, free for public viewing, all courtesy of Cogeco and Rogers. And don't forget, if you're watching live, make sure to tweet us at Cable14 or email election@cable14.com to share any questions you'd like to ask our candidates. As we continue our time with these candidates from Flamborough-Glanbrook, let's return to questions from our media panel, and we welcome back from CHCH, Jason Gaidola.
Thanks, Mike. My next question is directed to incumbent candidate Donna Skelly. Donna, there's obviously been major concerns, circling back to urban boundary, there's been many concerns that if elected, a PC government could overturn and expand the urban boundary. And obviously, you've been reportedly quoted saying that even if you do intensify the core, specifically the downtown core, you could max it out, and there has to be a reasonable outcome. Clearly, that's signaling that there would have to be an expansion if there is some sort of reasonable outcome if you're going to meet projected growth rates. So my question to you is, if elected, will the PC government appeal at the Ontario Land Tribunal in that scenario?
Well, first of all, we don't have a plan in front of us. There hasn't been a plan presented to the City of Hamilton. I know that they are looking at what they can do. We have given municipalities across Ontario the tools to concentrate a lot of the housing along transit. We talked about it earlier, along the transit initiatives, such as the West Harbour GO station, along the LRT, and along the any of the hubs, because we believe that's really where most of the concentration should go for intensification of housing. But we haven't seen a plan. I am adamant that I will, work with the city to make sure that our farmland, our farmers in Hamilton, Flamborough-Glanbrook, they contribute over $2 billion annually to our economy. And we have to preserve our farmland. We have to preserve, as I mentioned earlier, our charming communities like Greensville, like Sheffield, like Troy. We want to preserve that rural way of life. But it's up to the city to figure out, how do you accommodate 235,000 people? The numbers that they're using are their own numbers. It's their projected growth. We have to wait and see what the plan is.
Follow-up question, Jason?
My follow-up is to the candidates. Similar question: if in the event of a dilemma, like how do you see your party addressing the possibility of an urban boundary expansion?
Why don't we go to Melissa to start this one off?
Thank you. So we will respect the decision that was made by the Hamilton Council, as well as the thousands of people in Hamilton, to respect the current urban boundary. We have no intention of appealing that or requiring the city to go beyond that. We will work with the municipalities to ensure that there is a sufficient supply of affordable housing. And with sufficient wherewithal, we strongly believe that you can do both. You can build enough houses and maintain your green space if you are prepared to listen to all of the different types of stakeholders you need to listen to, housing advocates and the farmers and others here in Flamborough-Glanbrook who've been working so hard to maintain the green space, white space, green belt, whatever you want to call it. We will collaborate and continue to collaborate, as we've done over the last 2 years, in developing our plan with all relevant stakeholders, so that we can, in fact, it turns out, have our cake and eat it too. We can build housing through gentle densification within the existing urban boundary, while also respecting the space that makes this particular riding, as well as the rest of Ontario, that as beautiful as it absolutely is. Because when we talk about the urban boundary in Hamilton, we know that it's Flamborough-Glanbrook that is really at the heart of that discussion. So it will be very important as an MPP for this riding to ensure that that's respected.
As this question from Jason is open to everybody, let's go to Allison, and then we can open it up for more debate.
Absolutely. This is my community. I live here. This is so important to me because I know I'll be directly affected by this as well. The NDP, we believe in restoring the communication and building back that trust with municipalities, working with the City of Hamilton, and bringing back some integrity to land use planning. Affordable housing and responsible build is the most important way to do that. As I mentioned, Flamborough-Glanbrook residents voted overwhelmingly no. They do not want to pave over our farmland. There are ways to keep our farmers, our green space safe and protected, but also tackle the housing crisis and whatnot. Once we pave over the farmland, we know that it's gone. Hamilton City Council and the people of Hamilton have had their say. We're not here to be helping developer buddies and things like that. The NDP is not here to bully municipalities either. We're here to work together and actually represent the people of Flamborough-Glanbrook.
Open for debate. Anybody like to add on to this? Okay, we will continue on with our next question. Coming to us from Cable 14's Hamilton Network, Val Cole.
Thank you, Mike. This came through to us on election@cable14.com. Mark has this question directed to all of our candidates tonight. There have been incidents of students being jumped, and knives and guns are a common occurrence in the schools. What is being done about the violence in our area high schools?
Let's go with Donna here on this one to start, and then each candidate will have their opportunity.
Well, we've been working with our school boards. We've had some horrible situations, not just in Hamilton, terrible situations, not just in Hamilton, but in a lot of our urban areas. And we have to make schools safer for students and for staff and for teachers. And it's very difficult. Mental health supports have to be provided. We've brought in, nurses into the schools because over the past 2 years, we've seen a significant increase in children who are struggling with mental health issues. I also think that we need to reach out to our community and really lean on our community members who work with troubled youth. a few years ago, I was working, actually speaking to some of the police officers who work in the Guns and Gangs unit, and introduced me to a man who works with students on an intervention level. They want to reach out and form relationships with kids before they are attracted to gangs. I think that's one solution. I think we really do have to work with our community partners to figure out why kids are turning to drugs, to knives, and to weapons. When, we're obviously failing them, but we have to do something to stop that in our schools.
And that is time for you, Donna. We'll continue on. Allison, would you like to respond to that question presented by Val?
As an educator, myself working in the Hamilton board and being the parent of students in Flamborough-Glanbrook, this is an issue of grave concern to me. The NEP commits to working to end school violence, but an important way to do that is actually working with stakeholders who are working on the front lines, whether that's unions, different community organizations, getting together and creating this panel to help address the violence that's going on in schools. Now, it's mentioned community resources. We already know that we have programs like the John Howard Society who are already coming into our schools and doing such incredible work, but we need to amplify that even more. The NEP has a plan to bring in mental health supports and workers into schools, which will help address a lot of these issues right where the students are. I'm so proud of this. I know how important this is myself. I've had students who have been in crisis at school, and this is the way to deal with this. Increasing funding and education, and starting from junior kindergarten up, that's the way to get it done.
And that is time for you, Allison. Melissa, would you like to respond?
So one of the best things that we can do collectively as a society, if we want to tackle crime, is to tackle what drives people to a life of crime, or what are the circumstances under which people then choose to commit crime. It is an absolute tragedy, and I say this as a mom of a 13 and a 15-year-old, when children are involved as crime, either as perpetrators or as victims. And we must look at how do we structure a society to ensure that nobody feels that picking up a gun and picking up a knife is actually a useful, productive thing to do. We will be ensuring that there are appropriate mental health supports in every single school, so we can provide support and divert kids before it gets to that stage. But I don't want to overemphasize that, because I don't want to give into the narrative that people who commit crime, that people who have mental health problems commit crime, because we know overwhelmingly that's not the case. And I don't want to add to that stigma by the emphasis on mental health supports. But we also...
Melissa, our time is wrapped up for that particular response. Thank you very much. I think we will continue on, as we do have a little bit of time left. So we're going to try to get another round in, time permitting. Tevye Morrow from the Hamilton Spectator. He is back for another question to our candidates.
Thanks very much. I'll ask the Liberal candidate. Melissa, for some years now, there's been something called the Safe Streets Act, which the previous Liberal government decided that they would not repeal. I think the NDP wanted to repeal it, and I think the Progressive Conservative is supportive of the act. And basically, it allows law enforcement to ticket and charge people who are panhandling. And advocates say, this is cruel legislation. People who are out there trying to survive end up with these tickets they can't afford to pay in it under any circumstances. What would a Liberal government, should one be elected, do with that legislation?
So I think over the last number of years, there has been growing awareness of how criminalizing poverty is counterproductive. It's an injustice on our most vulnerable members, and it's not actually helpful if you're talking about how do we encourage people not to engage in the types of activities that this sort of legislation is intended to tackle. One of the hallmarks of our platform that we want to ensure that we do, if we are fortunate enough to form government on June 2nd, is to ensure that our police force is more diverse and more representative of the people in the province. Because we know that when you have more diversity, more representation, you actually end up with better policing. And so that is one of the most important things that we can do in order to ensure that policing is more responsive to the actual things that policing should be addressing.
And that's time for that. We will open this up for debate if anybody else would like to now get involved. Please.
Absolutely. I think it's so important to look at the reasons why these people ended up panhandling in the first place. No one should ever be in a position where they need to stand on the side of the road and be asking for money. The NDP has a plan to help address this through affordable housing, 30,000 units alone, just to help the unhoused and those dealing with addictions issues. Bringing in mental health care to OHIB, dental coverage, and as I mentioned, affordable homes. These are all ways that we can actually help address these issues at the root.
I wanted to address, if I may, the comments about supporting and having a more diverse police force, which I absolutely agree with. I'd like to see more women. I'd like to see more people of color, et cetera. But when you constantly beat up your police force and tell them that they're not valued, it discourages people from actually wanting to become a police officer. And right now, one of the big challenges, and I know this, I was speaking to the recruitment officer, I was emceeing the Hamilton Police retirement dinner, and I was talking to the recruiting officer, and he said it's very difficult to find young people who want to enter the profession. I mean, we know there's a shortage of workers in almost every sector in Ontario, but in policing in particular, and I think it's shameful, we have to support our men and women who put their lives on the line and go out and to keep us safe. And I think it's important that we give them that support. I'd also like to see more interaction with police officers and young people so that they can develop relationships and address some of the issues we talked about earlier, and perhaps even consider a career as a police officer.
I'm being told that we would like to move on to our next question. Thank you all for those responses to that particular one. Back from 900 CHML, Mr. Rick Zamperin, you're up.
Thank you. Hopefully you can let your guard down with this one. It's a bit of a softball, but I think it's an important one too, and we'll go with Melissa first on it. We have 3 women on this panel, 3 amazing women who are taking part in running for in this election. What is your message to young women, young girls who may be watching this thinking, I want to get involved in politics? What's your message to them?
Well, first, I'd say do it, because it is one of the most important things that we can actually do individually and collectively, is to get involved in politics. So I also, of course, noted that we have 3 women here, and I think regardless, at the end of the day, we will end up with a woman MPP for this riding of Flamborough-Glanbrook, which I think is excellent. Get involved, use your voice, figure out what your own values are, and you can start doing that at any age. My kids are 13 and 15, and I swear sometimes I think they know themselves better than I know myself. Know yourself, what's important to you, and then figure out where your own personal values align with. Which party, if you want to get involved in party politics, speaks to you the most. But also, it's important to remember all of the other organizations out there that actually are a very important complement to the political parties. All those grassroots organizations, of which there are many in Flamborough-Glanbrook. We've been talking a lot about green space. There are many excellent grassroots organizations in Flamborough-Glanbrook with respect to green space. But whatever is important to you or you care about, you can find an organization so that you can use your voice to push progress forward.
Thank you very much for that. We'll go with Donna, finish off by Allison. Donna.
I think I would say, it's a wonderful opportunity, and you can make such a difference in so many people's lives. But start at school. Run for city council, or run for student council, and get involved so that you understand that there is an effort. You have to campaign, you have to organize. It's not easy. People that first get into politics are usually really surprised at what you have to do in order to put together a campaign, and you need volunteers, and you need to speak to people. So start when you're young and get involved at a school level. I think it's a really good opportunity to see if this is something that you're interested in, and more importantly, don't be afraid of failure. Because if you're afraid to fail, you're not going to take a chance. And stay off social media. It's not worth it. Just stay off social media. I'm just so proud of I think the way we engaged here this evening. It was very civil, and it's a wonderful way. But when you go on social media, it's a totally different game, and it's not for anybody, and I just worry about our next generation
Thank
that
you very much
have
for
to live in
Donna.
that world.
Thank you. We would like to get Allison in before we get to our next question. Very quickly, Allison.
Yep. This is something that came up when I was visiting Southfleet High School. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Ask for the support. You have so many resources around you without even realizing it. If you would have asked me 10 years ago, even though I've always been a huge advocate, if I would be standing here today, the answer would be a hard no. Ask for support from those around you. You have more power in your voice than you realize, and never ever forget that. Get involved in organizations that are of interest of you, find like-minded people, but know that you have people in this community who are here to support you and here to guide you. And I'm so proud of the potential that can come out of Flamborough-Glanbrook here.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that. We have about 3 minutes left for some Q&A, so to our panel asking questions, keep them brief along with our answers. Bobby, you are up next from the CBC.
This is for the Conservative candidate. You talked about how your party wants to work with municipalities, build trust, work together. When asked about if you'll expand the urban boundary or not, the city said they don't want to. You didn't really give us a clear answer there.
We don't have a plan. They haven't put anything forward. We're waiting on a plan. I think ultimately people want to see housing built where it needs to be built, where it can be built, and to accommodate the projected growth. We also have to make sure it's affordable. One of the things we are doing with the City of Hamilton and all municipalities is giving them the money and the tools to build faster. If you think about the cost, when you drag your heels and you don't give a permit to a construction project and it drags on year after year after year, that price escalates. We've seen the price of wood go up, steel, etc. Housing that could have been built 2 years ago is probably double the cost today. So we want to work with municipalities to make sure that they can build homes faster.
And that is time. Quickly open that up for debate. If anyone would like to respond to Donna's. Yes, please, Allison.
Absolutely. We know that Ford has been bullying municipalities, city councillors, and they've really broken their trust. The NDP is here to bring back that connection. To answer pointedly, the NDP will not be supporting the urban boundary expansion. We're here to support the Greenlands. And, it's very, very obvious here in Flamborough-Glanbrook that is what the residents voted no against, but also looking at the rallies that are happening outside of Miss Skelly's office, farmers, community members coming together, using their voice to make sure that sprawl is not happening here in Hamilton.
Melissa, response?
I think regardless of a plan, this is an easy one to commit to because we know that you can achieve to meet the housing needs of Flamborough-Glanbrook and the rest of Hamilton without encroaching on the White Belt, without expanding that urban boundary here. And that's why the Liberal Party has committed to respect that decision.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Melissa. And I am being told that is time for our Q&A session. So thank you all again for your answers. And of course to our wonderful panel, Tevye Morrow, Rick Zamperin, Bobby Hristova, Jason Gaidola, and of course Val Cole. We only have a few minutes left with our Flamborough-Glanbrook candidates, so we must move on now to our closing statements. Going in reverse order from our opening, you each have 1 minute, starting with Melissa Willems for the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for those of you who've stayed with us throughout this entire time. Campaign can be tough. I think you've heard some allusion to that over the last hour and a half. And when I'm wondering about why did I throw my life up in the air to do this, I am reminded of the conversations that I've had with healthcare providers over the years about the challenges in our healthcare system, the folks in long-term care who were exhausted and burnt out and feeling abandoned by the Ford Conservatives, struggling with wondering how they were going to ensure that their patients got the care that they need. And I am reminded that the purpose of government is for us to come together to collectively do what we can't do individually. And on June 2nd, I would ask that you vote for the Liberal Party so that we can do just that.
Thank you very much for that. Up next, Donna Skelly of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mike. On June 2nd, Ontarians have a clear choice. They can vote for Andrea Horwath or Stephen Del Duca and see higher gas prices, a lack of affordable housing, lost jobs, and lost opportunity. Or they can vote for me, Donna Skelly, Doug Ford, and the PCs, who will build more affordable homes, more roads, more hospitals, and bring back more jobs. Only Doug Ford and the PCs will put more money back into your pocket while reclaiming Ontario's status as the economic powerhouse of this wonderful country. Ontarians deserve a government and a premier with a real plan. On June 2nd, say yes to me, Donna Skelly, Doug Ford, and the Ontario PC Party, and together we'll get it done.
Donna, thank you very much for that. And to close things off with closing remarks from the NDP, Alison Sillis.
Thank you. So this election, you have the unique opportunity to vote for someone who will stand up for our communities in Queen's Park to fix what's broken and who actually lives in this riding and knows what your needs are. It's about choosing a person who will stand by you, make your life more affordable, and provide the critical public services that you deserve, not broken promises like Ford or the Liberals. To be honest, I'm fed up too, and that's why I'm running to be your MPP. I know that we deserve better. We were a very close second in the last 2018 election, so we can get this done. We deserve healthcare and an education system that can thrive, and home care for seniors, dental and mental care, homes that you can afford without paving over farmland. We can have an Ontario that works for every single Ontarian. This hope starts with electing an NDP government, and by electing me, your neighbor, to represent the communities which we all love so much. I cannot wait to work with you and to better the lives of those in our communities. Thank you.
To all of our candidates, Alison Sillis, Donna Skelly, and Melissa Wilhelm, thank you so much for tonight's hour-and-a-half debate. We truly appreciate your time. And of course, I know it's a busy time for all of you to be campaigning, so thanks for taking the time to come in here to the Cable 14 studios. And of course, also running in Flamborough-Glanbrook are Paul Simoes for the New Blue Party, Mario Portak of the Green Party, Nikita Mahood, who we've heard from earlier, for the Populist Party, and Walt Jisnowicz of the Ontario Party. Now remember, if you miss any part of our local riding debates, well, you can find them on demand at cable14.com, free for public viewing and sharing, all courtesy of our good friends at Cogeco and Rogers. And take a look at the schedule to find out about all of our other debates coming up right here on Cable 14. Now, Hamilton, regardless of who you support, please take the time to vote on or before Thursday, June the 2nd, when polls will be open from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And of course, advanced voting dates and locations can also be found online now at elections.on.ca using your postal code. Next up on our debate schedule is the Hamilton West Ancaster-Dundas, airing exclusively live Friday night at 7 p.m. on cable14now.com, thespec.com, and our related social media platforms. It will also be repeated on our main channel over the next week, as the Hamilton Bulldogs are continuing their deep playoff run, hosting Game 1 of the third round Friday night against the North Bay Battalion. Please make sure to tweet us at Cable14 or email election@cable14.com with your questions for Hamilton West, Ancaster-Dundas, or any of our future debates happening next week. And be sure to watch Cable 14 on election night for up-to-date results and analysis. Our broadcast, it will begin right here at 8 p.m. Thanks again to our candidates here tonight, our panelists from the Hamilton Spectator, 900 CHML, CBC, CHCH, and the Hamilton Network. And thank you for watching the Hamilton Network's Flamborough-Glanbrook Provincial Election Debate. I'm Mike Fortune. So long for now.